next keynote will be held by the one and only Zaki Manian from Sommelier.
Hey.
Hi.
How's it going? All right. I'm Zaki. If you are new to Cosmos, you may be very confused about what it is that I do. So I'm Zaki. I've been working on this technology stack for 7 years. I've probably been around Cosmos more than anyone else who's here. So as a result, I kind of do a lot of everything. So I work on a bunch of different projects, and you are welcome to come and ask me about all of the different things that I'm interested in and working on in the Cosmos. But this talk is going to be mostly about a project that I am, this is the project where I am CEO. It's called Sommelier. This is the project that has sort of takes one of the ideas that I've had for a very long time about what Tendermint and the Cosmos stack could be useful for something that is sort of doesn't exist in this sort of DeFi ecosystem, and has made it real. So let's talk a little bit about it. So I would frame why build Sommelier comes from this place of we assume when we started building blockchains, sort of general purpose smart contract blockchains back in 2015, I think what most of us who were working at the time imagined the blockchains would be for is for DeFi. DeFi was always the dream. DeFi was always the vision of what it is that why would somebody want to have a general purpose smart contract blockchain? So it's been really exciting to come to when 2020 happened, and suddenly we had hundreds of thousands, millions of users of DeFi tools on these systems, people who were making and losing large amounts of money, and naturally this got regulators interested in who've always been sort of interested in cryptocurrencies, even more interested in what it is this DeFi thing is. So we've created this community that we call degens. But what are degens, and is there any sort of redeeming value to them? And we do a bad job of communicating this as an industry. I think of the DeFi user community as the group of people who are beta testing or alpha testing experimental financial software. And there would be no reason to do that if there was not the possibility of either great loss or great gain. And the thing that is unique about sort of the DeFi process, DeFi as an industry, DeFi as a community, is that the stuff that gets built from this beta testing, the stuff that we learn works and learn doesn't work, actually is public infrastructure. It is open source software. And what the end goal of all of this is to have the mechanisms of finance be public infrastructure rather than private systems running within some sort of granite-walled building. So the problem with this phase is that regulators see this stuff as a casino, but software only works when people start to depend on it. If people don't depend on it, you will not have people who are angry at this thing, who are not finding bugs, who are not figuring this out. So what we are doing is we are still very much in the battle testing phase of sort of a DeFi-enabled financial system, which may go on for a decade. So right now, we are in a very difficult place, especially in the US, where regulation is done through enforcement, and regulation does not see the bigger picture of what it is that we are trying to build in the DeFi space. So you have this regulation through enforcement thing, where no one knows what the rules are, but certain people get into litigation with various regulators, and we sort of inadvertently discover where the boundaries of the system are. This is not a coherent way to build an industry, and all it has resulted in is perverse effects throughout the entire system. So what I would hope we are sort of getting towards, or what we would want to do from a regulatory point of view, is get to a place where the regulatory system is offering incentives for projects for clear disclosure, for more coherent explanation of like how tokens are distributed, where power lies within the system, what the incentives are of all the different participants, rather than this like enforcement through regulation through enforcement type mechanism. That is hopefully the future that we somehow get to, but it doesn't look like we're getting there anytime soon. So what we need to do in the meantime, in the meantime of this chaos, is to get to my point, is we need to figure out a way to make more and more things in DeFi like sort of self-certifying and less reliant on trust. Trust in a brand, trust in a website. These things are, you should be able to somehow trust that like the mechanism of an automated market maker like Uniswap without having to interact with it through like uniswap.org. That must be the vision of how we interact with DeFi. So with this vision in mind, I'm here, Montes is here from the Sommelier team. We started working almost more than a year ago on Sommelier, which is a Cosmos SDK. So what is Sommelier? It is a Cosmos SDK chain that connects to Ethereum via an application-specific bridge. So we don't use the sort of generic bridge providers. We use an application-specific bridge that's based off of the same code base as the Gravity bridge to coordinate the execution of DeFi strategies. So why do you need this? The reason you need this is the initial sort of experience of DeFi, which is very much like where Cosmos DeFi is right now, was very capital inefficient, but it was a very even playing field for a lot of different actors. The first version of automated market makers was you put your liquidity in, everyone's on the same playing field, everybody's locking their liquidity for long periods of time. You don't have any advantage over any other participant in the market. If you look at where Ethereum DeFi has gone, the race for capital efficiency, the race for TVL, the race for fee revenues, has driven DeFi into this much more complex place. As a result, the returns for sort of ordinary users have gone down, and the sort of DeFi dream of not just having a different front end for finance, but actually getting participation in the sort of the intermediary role, the back end role of finance for the general public seems to be dying. So Sommelier is an attempt to use all of this technology that we have in Cosmos that we are so excited about to kind of shift that trajectory. So this is a picture of the Sommelier's first strategy. The UI will go live. We'll talk about it towards the end. But this is a picture of Sommelier's first strategy. What it is, so in a lending protocol, a lending protocol allows you to earn yield by making tokens available to be borrowed. It is sort of like, it allows like anyone to be a liquidity provider, a depositor into this sort of extremely resilient online bank. But we have many tokens that have similar risk profiles. So, there are in this ecosystem of blockchains, half a dozen large stablecoins. They all track the value of the dollar. Many of them have very similar risk profiles. But you can earn vastly different yields on lending them, and those yields are constantly evolving over time. So if you are today a person who is trying to figure out, hey, I have some cash, I would like to earn yield in this crazy blockchain system, how can I do that? You would put you could purchase, you would convert your US dollars or euros or et cetera into a stable coin by purchasing them on an exchange. You could deploy them into this Aave protocol. But now you don't really have enough information about, hey, like what is the expected yield? Which coin should I choose? And you are likely to experience like relatively low yields. Now, the other thing you could do is like to go back, you could put your money into Rockaway's yield fund. And Rockaway's yield fund kind of does all of this work for you. It figures out, it analyzes risk, it figures out which tokens you could possibly be lending, and optimizes all this, and you pay Rockaway fees for doing this. But not everyone can be an investor in Rockaway's yield fund. So how do you recapture the DeFi dream of sort of decentralized access to finance while acknowledging the fact that these increasingly complex DeFi protocols actually need people to play the role of reallocating and rebalancing funds? So this is the solution thing that Sommelier is a solution for. We leverage this ecosystem of validators that we have built in the Cosmos ecosystem and the idea of an off-chain sort of strategist to make for a non-custodial system. So what Sommelier will do when you put your funds into the Aave seller is it will take those funds and run a sort of a data-driven real-time model of where it anticipates the best yields will be and reallocate what stablecoins are being lent by the user to this. And for this service, you will get paid. The Som network will collect some tokens. The strategy provider will collect some value. So this is our sort of our concept of doing this, which I think is really unique. Right now, you kind of think of the model of what is a blockchain. Most blockchains are built with something like what Ethereum was in 2015, 2016 in mind. They're using the blockchain as this like sort of neutral computation layer that other people can build applications on top of. What Sommelier is it's using a blockchain for what it can be, which is a coordination layer. It allows a variety of different roles to exist, be incentivized to interact, and execute this coordination, the needed coordination for this use case amongst themselves. We have seller creators in Sommelier, so very important role. Seller creators actually create the smart contracts that interact with the DeFi protocols on the like underlying L1. So you can run. So for the Aave seller, we have a smart contract that sort of executes, that contains the funds, executes the business logic, runs on Ethereum. There are strategists, and strategists provide a data feed of like when and how to rebalance. And then validators execute the rebalance function based on inputs from the strategist. So to come back to this question of like, how is it that we actually ensure that we're building sort of a system that doesn't put trust in any single party, whether it's me or Sommelier, the sort of protocol group, or like a single DAO. We actually have a lot of checks and balances in this system. So Som token holder governance vets sellers before deployment. They have a strong incentive to do this because that's the way they get paid. If Som holders want fee revenue, they need to actually have sellers that correctly like generate fees and return them to them. They also need the sellers to be profitable. So there's a huge reason and incentive for Som governance to carefully vet what sellers are offered on the platform before deployment. The idea of having a smart contract on the underlying L1 is basically the idea of, hey, we want to maintain a trust boundary where where Sommelier could go down, Sommelier could halt, Sommelier could have a security vulnerability in it, strategists could go rogue, but like the user's funds are fundamentally available to be added and withdrawn on the underlying L1 blockchain that they already sort of have a trust relationship with. And then the third check and balance in this whole system is the idea that validators can pick a new strategy feed provider. So essentially the validators can fire the strategist If they get a better offer, if someone else comes along and says, hey, I can generate more profits from the network using my model and my predictions about how to run this strategy, than the current provider. And they can sort of offer like back testing to the validator set to agree on this. And basically all of these pieces come together and allow for this like sort of unique social coordination layer that really doesn't exist in DeFi that like will provide sort of additional access. So all of this is coming on June 1st. So like where are we in this whole process? Many of the Sommelier validators are here. We just finished a network upgrade that enables this new seller system to exist. We just finished it on Friday. We are sort of in live testing of this system that we're going to start doing testing sort of after this conference. The UI by our friends at Strangelove is coming together very nicely. We are structured as this like sort of decentralized organization. So this project is a collaboration between an entity called Peggy JV that helped work on the Gravity Bridge, Occlusion, which is a validator that I'm a co-founder of, and Strangelove, and we are adding new entities to this family on a regular basis. So what can the attendees of Gateway take away? What can you do with Sommelier? So if you are an expert in building Solidity contracts, you can write new seller contracts. Now, documentation is a little bit rough right now, but if you go to sommelier.finance, you can find out a little bit more about this. We will be open sourcing the Aave seller contract probably this week, and that will be a pretty big milestone. It'll probably provide the sort of first real example of how a Sommelier seller is built and deployed. The software that we just upgraded to on Friday can support an unlimited number of sellers on Ethereum for any DeFi protocol with no additional protocol changes, which was really exciting, and the result of many months of work. What are the other big moving pieces here? So then the other moving piece is like, that I think is actually going to be very interesting to like sort of bring people up to speed on is this idea of how do you run a strategy provider? Like right now, we find that there are a lot of DeFi protocols that are actually running strategy providers through a multi-sig already. And what we view Sommelier as is kind of a magic protocol for taking what is currently custodial, what is currently a fixed set of participants in a static multi-sig, and turning it into a decentralized, non-custodial, trustworthy execution environment. So these are sort of the big pieces of what Sommelier is. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Zaki. Yeah, we actually have a couple of questions.
Let's go.
Yeah, the first one is your take on SIPS 008.
So, airdrops and their controversies. So one of the other cool things that went into the so we've had a little bit of a tortured history with Sommelier. One of the things that we were originally doing is, we started out this project. We were very excited about Uniswap v3, which came out, in May of 2021. Then we learned through a lot of analysis and experimentation that pretty much any strategy that a decentralized entity can do to provide liquidity on concentrated liquidity to market makers like Uniswap v3 loses money. And so there was an original go-to-market plan for this protocol that was very focused on Uniswap v3 liquidity providers. The initial version of the system that we just deprecated had a whole bunch of machinery for doing that and managing Uniswap v3 liquidity positions. But we basically realized that it would be a disaster to go forward with a protocol that just loses money. The second piece that was in the upgrade that happened on Friday is we now have the ability to do community spend proposals directly to Ethereum smart contracts. So rather than having to have a multi-sig manage a community spend proposal to do liquidity mining or an airdrop, we can now do this directly within the protocol. So my plan is we are all in on engineering resources. We are fully committed on this June 1st launch date that we are targeting for bringing this UI online, bringing the first sellers online. But then after we're done with that, we are in a much better position to think about retroactive rewards for some of the prototype applications that we've done in the past on top of Sommelier, and continuing to incentivize new parties to build on top.
Nice. And another question is, and it's like we get like these kinds of questions very often nowadays because of the Terra crash. So how do you see the crash of Terra for the next DeFi waves? Which lessons we should take on it as users and builders?
So, I mean, I think that one thing that you could argue is, one of the things I would question about Terra is Terra argued very much that they were the most decentralized stablecoin. But Terra didn't really have this system of checks and balances that I just outlined for Sommelier, where you actually have multiple independent roles that are incentivized to sort of check each other. And in many ways, that sort of led to the creation of this extremely unstable, fragile system that it took an unprecedented sort of attack from an economic point of view. So a couple of things that I think we should learn from the whole Terra system. One is, we should no longer operate under the assumption that people will not deploy billions of dollars in economic attacks on protocols. So that means that every DeFi builder has to think a lot more about the robustness of the protocol, but also how the protocol fails under attack. I think the worst thing about Terra is that once you push the system out of a stable state, it sort of catastrophically degrades. And this is how we've thought about Sommelier. What happens if a validator goes rogue, if the chain halts, et cetera? What happens to user funds? And a big part of the architectural thinking of this system is that users would actually be able to get their money out, no matter sort of what happens to the protocol. And I think those are the things that are going to end up being important.
Yeah, 100%. And last question, do you think people like the crypto mom Hester Peirce have a real impact on the regulatory framework in the US, or is this just a drip on the hot stone?
I think Hester is a really positive force, but ultimately, there are a bunch of competing sort of forces within shaping the regulatory picture within the United States. One side of it is the sort of built-in reactionary thinking, the sort of desire to just please sort of anti-crypto forces by demonstrating regulatory action and enforcement action and big fines against projects. That is sort of viscerally satisfying to a certain set of the establishment, rather than trying to construct. Hester has probably been the most constructive regulator in the entire ecosystem in the United States. And I would think that this is a huge opportunity that it sort of depends what happens politically in the United States, how the next set of elections and the set of elections in the 2022 elections and the 2024 elections actually play out, how much power the sort of constructivist elements have. It's going to be interesting because you are going to see presidential candidates in 2024 in the United States running on pro-crypto platforms, most likely. And so that could also be a pretty big sea change.
Thank you, Zaki. One big round of applause, please.